Welcome to the Finding Purpose LiveCast, where we feature authors, leaders, and speakers of purpose on a live platform to have truly authentic conversations. And now your host, Davin Salvagno.
Hey, Gabrielle, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on.
I'm so excited for you to be here today. And I know that we've been sharing a lot of similar messages over the years, and you guys have done some amazing things in the purpose space, and particularly in this season of COVID. And you had some plans in the beginning of the year, and there's been some shifting that maybe you've done, but I know that you're going to bring together a incredible message of purpose and a lot of insight and wisdom that a lot of people can use, especially right now. So thank you for taking time. You've been busy. You got a new book coming out, right? The Purpose Factor, just released, right?
Yep. So it's actually, again, back to COVID. It's I think delayed another 2 weeks or something. So you can go on to purposefactorbook.com and get it, but you won't get it till October 13th. So
And then COVID happened.
exactly.
That's exactly.
It hits again.
It hits again. So for those of you listening, Gabrielle is co-founder of the book, The Purpose Factor, which she wrote with her husband, Brian. And she's also co-founder of the company, The Purpose Company. She's also America's millennial expert, as she has been known, TEDx speaker. This is your 5th book, right? You've written 5 books. This is book number 5. Yeah. And is very, very well versed in the purpose space. She continues to consult and work with organizations and leading in that space, helping them understand different generational dynamics. But she really, really has a passion. If you've engaged any of her content, a passion for truly helping you identify and unleash the purpose that is within you and the purpose that is within your organization. So without further ado, what a year it has been. Talk to us about just a little bit about your journey, maybe leading into 2020, and then maybe kind of like what your plans were, and then COVID happened.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, going into 2020, it was kind of a big shift. Like you'd mentioned before, my husband, Brian, and I run the company together. We write books together, and we had recently moved at the beginning of COVID. So if anyone is interested in what it's like to move during COVID, or like, should I move during a pandemic? If you're concerned or questioning, I caution against it. But it really created, I think, an opportunity for us to have a complete reset. Where we moved, we were living in Virginia at the time, moved to Dallas, Texas in the middle of a pandemic, and really repositioning, finding a new community, getting introduced to a new physical space, let alone a new mental space of the world literally changing around us. And so we really kind of came into this season recognizing that we had a choice of how we were going to react to it. We could either see it as a crisis, as something that we would have to, survive and, just kind of push through and try and get back to normal, or it's something that we could view as a gift, as something that we could be grateful for, and that we could recognize that this is a season that we're never going to have anything like this ever again, hopefully not, and that we could really come out of this the other side stronger. And so I'm really proud of us. There were, every day wasn't certainly, all sunshine and rainbows and motivational posters, but I think for the most part, I think we've done a really incredible job of using this season to be able to slow down, reposition ourselves and our company, and really look at how do we serve people during this time when, whether an executive, a stay-at-home mom, a student, everyone is in some sort of transition, and they're all wondering, number one, do I matter? And number two, does the work that I do matter? And so that's really our role at the Purpose Company, is really helping people answer those 2 big questions.
That's huge. And I think I know that we've shared, our friend Zach has shared before. Right now, he's really big, Zach Mercurio, on mattering. And what you just said right there, do I matter? Does the work that our company does matter? And I think right now, that's what people are really struggling with, is this concept of, before I used to be able to see how my work mattered. And now, we're so distracted. Everyone has gone through the season of being isolated in their homes. We're living in a Zoom remote world. I know we just shared a conversation prior to that of some people are like, this is great. I'm wearing pants. I'm not wearing pants. Others are like, I can't deal with another Zoom meeting. I need to get back into the office. I need to physically see how my work matters. And there's a lot of people and companies who are having an identity crisis because maybe what they were doing or the thing that they made or what their purpose was prior to COVID is very different today than what the need is. And they've had to shift. They've had to, maybe their purpose hasn't changed, but how they deliver on that has changed. What they do changes. And I think that's the same for everyone individually and organizationally. And what a time for the purpose company to come on scene, right? For you to develop this mission, say, we really want to help people identify what their work is and that it matters and what their purpose is, and organizations. And you guys were already developing that prior to COVID, and then COVID happened, and here you are, and it's like the world needs this.
Sure. Yeah. And this concept of purpose certainly isn't something new, and it's not something that is, that folks haven't been talking about for a while. But I think it's so interesting that because of the circumstances that we're currently living in, that people have more white space on their calendar for them to be able to now dig deeper, have those deeper questions of, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Or, wondering, hey, like I just hit 50. Is this what I want to do the rest of my life? Or, is this what I want to be studying? I mean, no matter where you're at in your life, COVID has created a transitional moment for you. And so there's almost, I kind of describe it as this like vibration inside of you where, we oftentimes dull it by distractions or delays, saying, I'll wait till I retire to, pursue my purpose, or I'll wait till, my kids get out of the house, or I'll wait till I, get married. And we create these kind of arbitrary fences that we have to jump over to finally feel like we have permission to pursue our purpose. But I think that this pandemic has really caused so many people to recognize, I'm still kind of wondering, is this what I should be doing? Or I'm still kind of wondering, how did I get into this? Or is it too late for me? And so it's really kind of thrust upon many people these bigger life questions that we certainly all have. We're all designed to have these big questions. There's a reason that, my cat doesn't look out. I actually don't have a cat. I'm lobbying my husband for a cat. So this is like me saying, Brian, buy me a cat. But the cat I will soon have when my husband gets it for me doesn't look outside the window and say, like, I wonder why I'm here. Right? Like there's a reason that we're created to ask some of these life big questions. And I think that embracing it rather than running away from it. And so even during this time, my kind of mantra at the beginning, and this is when people were just starting to work from home, they were just trying to balance, okay, great. So do I do laundry in the middle of the day? Do I do the Zoom call? Do I still do my 9 to 5? Like people were really struggling with, how do you structure your time? And we've worked from home, our whole team works from home. So it really wasn't much of a transition, but really for me coming into it, I recognized that I could either consume or I could create. I could consume media, I could consume carbs. I just moved to Dallas. And so I think I've tried every single taco joint in the greater Dallas area, always open for new suggestions. So please let me know. I could consume all of these things, media, entertainment, distraction, Netflix binging, that I think as a society, we almost started to glamorize and say, yeah, I'm, watching Netflix in the middle of the day, versus recognizing that I can also use this to create. I can use the silence. I can use the lack of needing to run around and respond to everybody else's agenda. I could use this moment to go deeper in my spirituality, to spend time on meditation, to focus on my health and my wellness. Those things that I think we kind of put off because it feels good to have goals we're working towards, but we're not really prioritizing, are now front and center in our lives. And so I think that this season has really been powerful to give, I think, people permission to pursue their purpose, whereas before they were maybe waiting for a magical moment that was probably never going to happen.
That is so good. You can either consume in this time or you could create. And you could also argue you could choose to be consumed in this time, or to consume in this time, or to create. And I think that's the challenge that a lot of people were faced with when this happened was, do I panic? Do I allow this time to consume me? Do I pander and just consume consume stuff and wait for this to fly over? or do I position and use this time to create and to really dig into my purpose and to not wait for permission? And I know there's a lot of people listening right now that are saying, well, that's all great and all, but I don't even know where to start. There's people who have found their purpose. It's great that Gabrielle and Davin have found their purpose. It's great that all these people are speaking about purpose, and I'm either too old or that time has passed or this excuse or whatever the case is. I don't know where to start. And I know that your book goes into this, and that provides a bit of a blueprint and some starting points for people to answer those questions. But for those that are listening right now and they're sitting here and they have whatever, there's all these lies that are being spoken into their head. And we need to help them in this moment of time overcome those lies and say, no, you do have a purpose, you do matter, and here's how you start. What would you say?
Yeah. And I've really found that there's kind of active and passive, what we call purpose killers. So the passive purpose killers are kind of people in your lives or circumstances that don't necessarily tell you don't pursue your purpose or don't find your purpose, but they're also not encouraging you to. So maybe it's a spouse or a partner or a friend who's like, yeah, that's nice, but that's kind of fluffy. Or, when you're kind of coming to them and saying, yeah, I'm wondering like what more I could do, or I feel like I'm not really living up to my potential. And they're saying, yeah, okay, cool. Like have another beer, or like, oh, let's go over, go to the park or something. So they're not telling you don't, but they're not telling you to do it either. So those are kind of the passive purpose killers. And I call those like the speed bumps. They're in your life. Sometimes you're related to them or married to them and you love them, but you have to recognize that they will never tell you to pursue your purpose, and they will never show you what your purpose is because they're not supposed to. And so that's why it's so important to recognize that a lot of times we've been looking for circumstances, degrees, partners, opportunities to come in and say, Davin, this is your purpose. And they're not going to come. That knight in shining armor isn't going to come. And I think a lot of times we assume that, like, well, if I get another degree, then I'll find my purpose. Or when I get married, or when I have kids, and we create these kind of arbitrary moments. The second type of purpose killer is the active purpose killer. And I call those the fences. So those are people who come in your way and say, you're not good enough. And sometimes those active purpose killers is our brain telling us you're not worthy, it's too late for you, you're too old, you're too young, you're too inexperienced, you don't make enough money, you make too much money. There are all of these lies that we tell ourselves, as well as other people in our lives. It could be a mother-in-law, it could be a neighbor, it could be a boss, but people who literally look at you and say, who do you think you are, thinking your purpose is worth pursuing? And those are just as dangerous. And so when you recognize that there are these active and passive purpose killers in our life, and you can start to label them, I think that you really start to recognize that you are the only person that has the authority to be able to pursue your purpose. You're the only one who's going to be able to go on that journey. No one can do it for you. And so whether that's, pursuing your purpose, getting clarity about, what that next move is for you, whether it's a new job or a new relationship, whether that's looking at, hey, I love what I do, but I feel like I'm disconnected. I talk to a lot of people who, love what they do, or at least loved what they did in the past. And they're saying, I don't know what happened. I've kind of lost this spark. I've lost my passion, which is one of those words we talk a lot about in our book, Purpose Factor, how we have really made a big mistake in equating passion and purpose. Because passion, the dictionary definition of passion, and I don't know if we talked about this or not, but the Oxford definition of passion is a barely controllable emotion. A barely controllable emotion. And so we come in and we talk to undergrad students, and we talk to people in transition, or people looking for their jobs, or people going into retirement, and say, just find your passion. It ends up being absolutely terrible advice. And so in our book, I grew up on Mad Libs. And so we do kind of a Mad Lib type thing where we take some of these famous pieces of advice, like, I don't need an alarm clock. My passion wakes me up, or, turn your passion into a paycheck. If you take the word passion and replace it with its dictionary definition of a barely controllable emotion, saying turn your barely controllable emotion into a paycheck, sounds like pretty dangerous advice because you could be passionate about ice cream, or you could be passionate about human trafficking. And so finding, for us, as we teach passion, one of the hallmarks of passion is, are you willing to sacrifice for it? What are you willing to give up for it? Are you willing to give up things for your passion for golf? Maybe. Are you willing to, give up something for your passion for coffee or your passion for corgis or whatever that is? A lot of times we use the word passion when we really mean things I like or things that are my hobbies. But when we train ourselves, especially in the workforce, to start looking for things that we're passionate about, we start to look for things that are emotional versus things that are fulfilling. So purpose, the way we define purpose is what you have inside of you to help other people. Plain and simple. It's what you have inside of you to help others. But fulfillment is the result of helping others with what you have.
Yes.
And so oftentimes we work with, the US military, we work a lot with the Navy, with the Air Force, we work with Fortune 500 companies, we work with boutique consulting firms. And when we come in and we work with these companies, they're all telling us, hey, help our employees get more engaged, find more fulfillment. But no one knows what fulfillment is. It's fulfillment a thank you note on my desk? Is it appreciation at work? Is it a raise? Is it free beer in the break room? I don't know, right? So helping people understand and even be able to quantify for themselves, what does fulfillment look like? And it's quite simply the result of using your purpose to help other people.
That is so solid. That last 10 minutes that you just shared is such a great framework that people need to play over and over again, because you identified very clearly what the obstacles to purpose were. And I love the passive and the active killers of purpose. And one of those other killers is, and it's really kind of in that head, is that comparison thing, right? Where we're always comparing ourselves and, well, someone else already wrote that book, or someone else already gave that talk, or someone else already created that invention that I was going to create, or someone else already, and they did it better than me. Someone already wrote that song. Someone already did. And so there's these lies being told to us that are preventing us from fulfilling or using the God-gifting talents and abilities that we have been given. And as you just mentioned, what purpose is using those talents and gifts that we've been given in the service of others. And then fulfillment is what we experience and who we become in the process of doing so. I know you've seen, and we've shared this before, the whole Venn diagram of purpose of you love it, you're good at it, the world needs it, you get paid to do it. And often most people just look at that vertical and say, great, how do I get paid to do what I love? That's my purpose. And that's not at all your purpose. You have to start the other way. What is it that I'm great at that the world needs? And let's start here. And then if you can get paid to do that, fantastic. But ultimately the byproduct is that when you're using your gifts in the service of others, where the need is, whether you get paid to do it or not, and you end up loving it, you then find that fulfillment that you just talked about. I have a feeling you're about to show me a page in your book of that. Boom, there it is. Right?
Yeah. So we actually went through and we're like, passion grows as your skills grow. Like plain and simple. Like, it's very rare that you're going to find someone say, I'm really, I'm really passionate about something that I'm bad at, unless you watch like American Idol and all those other things, right? That's called delusion. That's not called passion. But when you recognize that the more you improve in something, the more passionate you're going to get about it, because you recognize that you're helping people with your skills.
Yes.
So we were working with an eye doctor, very, very successful man, extremely, extremely driven. And so he was at this point in his life where he's saying, I want my life to matter. He's in his 50s. So he's doing everything like becoming certified in Russian kettlebells. He's getting his pilot's license. He is like, I think he's like coaching like an Olympic athlete right now. Like, he's an incredible, incredible person. But he felt like, I don't know my purpose. I do this thing over here. I'm a retinal eye surgeon and I make good money, but really I want to do all this stuff over here. And so we helped him identify, the way we teach purpose, there's 4 core elements. And we helped him understand and identify, how are you using your purpose now? Because
Yes.
purpose isn't for later. Purpose isn't for Sunday mornings. It's not for when you volunteer. It's not for the one day out of the year where you feel like you matter. It's not for, when you watch your grandkids on the weekend. All of those are opportunities or platforms to use your purpose, but that in and of itself is not your purpose. And so what we helped him really identify is, where are you at right now and how can you use your purpose? And it was like a light went off. And he's like, oh my gosh, every single day I have patients coming in and I'm able to use these core elements of my purpose. One of the ways that we teach purpose is what we call origin story. So that thing in your life that you overcame. Because when you overcome something, you then have authority and opportunity to help others overcome. And all of us are currently overcoming something and have overcome something. So identifying that is really powerful. And so just that simple switch for him to recognize, I can help people overcome things in their family, their finances, all of these lessons he's learned. He now sees every patient as an opportunity to see his purpose, rather than the patient as the paycheck that he has to use his purpose outside of what he's currently doing.
Yes, so good. And there was such insight that you just shared there, because I think a lot of people are sitting here saying, okay, I'm bought in. I want to fulfill my purpose. I want to use my gifts in the service of others, but I really don't know where to start. And as you just shared, one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, what are the areas in your life that you have overcome? I've often shared this in the past that, if you're going through something, if you're overcoming a struggle and you're asking God, what's the purpose in all of this? It's usually because you're going to come out on the other end of that. And then somewhere down the road, it could be 5, 10, 20 years later, or it could be now, as you said, there's someone that's going to be placed into your life that you need to help overcome, walk through that same minefield that you just walked through. And that was your purpose in going in it. And now you've discovered what part of your purpose is. So what are the things you've overcome? And then the other thing is, we didn't really talk about this, but you talked about the passive and active purpose killers. But I think that there's also those purpose whisperers in our life that if we listen, if we quiet our minds, they're the ones that are coming up to us and saying, hey, you're really good at this. Or, hey, you did this thing, or you said this thing, or you helped me in this way. Thank you. So what are the areas, yes, that you've overcame, but also where are the areas in your life that people are telling you that you've contributed to their lives? And are you identifying how you did that and then honing that in as a part of your purpose?
Yeah, there's a couple core questions that I love to ask people. Like, if I just have like 20 minutes, like if I were to sit down and have coffee with you, questions I can ask you to help you really get clarity about your individual purpose. And one of them is, what is the most fulfilled day that you've ever had at work?
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be at work, because a lot of times people will say, oh, the birth of my child, or when I got, engaged, or, things like that, which are beautiful, powerful moments. But when fulfillment is a result of helping others with what you have, you start to recognize, okay, great, what kind of projects was I working on? Was it a group project? Was it an individual project? Who was I working with? Who was I helping? And what type of work was I doing? Was it program management? Was it something technical? Was it something where you were strategizing? Was it something that you came up with the idea and then you got to propose the idea? And it's one of my favorite questions to ask. And when we work with HR managers, we teach them to ask this question when they're hiring people, because you learn so much about employees. When you say, what's your most fulfilled day at work? They're going to open up, they're going to blossom, because now they're thinking back, how can I replicate that day every day? Which you can when you start to, as a manager, lead with purpose. When you recognize that the people on your team aren't just employees doing jobs, but they are purpose-filled individuals who have an opportunity to use your current position as a platform for them to be able to help others. A lot of people want to ask questions like, what's your why, and starting off with that. But what we've actually really found is the question about purpose isn't why. Why helps us identify our motivation.
Yes.
Why are you doing that? Well, your why could be losing weight to make your ex jealous, or it could be ending childhood hunger. I mean, whatever that looks like for you, that's a motivation, and both are powerful. But your purpose is about who. It's number one about who you are, and number two about who it is that you're helping.
Yes.
And so everything, whether you're an individual, a leader, a student, a company, everything comes down to who. Who are we here to help? because as people, we're created to be problem solvers for people, whether you're dealing with, rescuing, stray dogs or climate change or, installing FiOS internet somewhere. Everything is about solving a problem for people. And I think that's really the conversation why purpose is so important, especially during COVID, is because we have created a distance or a disconnect between humans where we're not able to connect face to face, one-on-one like we used to before. And I think that's why anxiety, depression, frustration at work is going through the roof, is because we miss the congeniality, the relationships, the accountability that really happens when we come in contact with other people. And so a lot of organizations are now saying, well, what is our purpose? Do we need to recalibrate our purpose? Our people aren't as committed. They're having trouble with time management. They're having trouble with productivity. A lot of these challenges that we didn't necessarily have before, they're now coming in and asking these big questions of how do we first recalibrate our purpose as an organization? And secondly, how do we help our employees find their purpose and connect that purpose to what we do as an organization?
Yes, yes, yes. And I know he's not on the screen right now, but right now, our director of client partnerships and the producer of the show, Adam Ritchie's behind the screen, just probably like pounding his fist, saying yes. He's like, oh my gosh, this is so spot on, because what you just shared, two things, right? So one, I want to highlight two big things that you just said. We often confuse the words purpose and why. And I would also say we also add that word mission, purpose, mission, and why. We confuse those three words. They get used interchangeably. And I know that, Simon Sinek did some great work, obviously, with Start With Why. And there's a lot of books that use that as a blueprint. But as you just shared, why is not your purpose? Why is your motivation? Why is internally focused? Your why is your motivation. Your purpose is externally focused. Your purpose is the who, yes, who you are, but then who am I impacting? Who am I helping by using my gifts in this way? And that same formula is the same for companies, right? They want to start with why on what their motivation is to motivate their teams, but they have to start with who is it that we're impacting? I mean, no disrespect to Simon, but you almost need to kind of say, start with who, right? Start with who is it that I want to help? Start with who is it that I want to impact? Who is it that we want to impact? And then how can we do that? What are the giftings, talents, and abilities, the things that are in here and in here that we can channel or leverage to impact those people? And now you've kind of found that purpose, that center piece there. And then the why is going to be the motivation that's going to make us do that every day. The story behind that. When I was with CVS Pharmacies and we were talking about the opioid epidemic, we started a campaign called Who Is Your Who? And we started talking about people that unfortunately made poor decisions and or were victims of the opioid epidemic, and we wish we could have saved them. We wish that those were lives that we could have saved. And we started naming those people. Those were the who, right? But the why, the motivation became that we didn't want to see more names added to that list. There were people in our lives that we knew that we were struggling, that we wanted to make sure that beat that epidemic. And so that's very, very critical that you distinguish the difference between why and who, the difference between why and purpose. And that was so spot on. The other thing that you said was connecting organizational and individual purpose. I mentioned Adam is because one of the things that we've talked about is closing that IO gap, right? The individual purpose and the organizational purpose, and what true alignment and engagement is in an organization is when you can bring those two things together and close the gap between individual purpose and organizational purpose, right? How am I as an individual contributing to the overall purpose of my organization and who we're here to impact and help? Mm-hmm. And then how is the company as an organization contributing to my individual purpose of how I'm meant to be utilized while I'm here?
Yep. Yeah, and I think right now there are a lot of organizations doing great work when it comes to corporate social responsibility and wanting a company to give back. But the challenge is that a lot of even very well designed, very elaborately designed CSR programs are really still focused on me as a company. Come join us. Right. Come join what we're doing and come volunteer where we want you to volunteer. Come, give to the organizations that we've approved. And it really lacks one powerful trait, and that's trust. And I think that's what organizations are really missing right now. Corporations, whether you have 12 people or 12,000 people in your organization, if you lack trust, it's simply because your people and you don't know your purpose. When you are fully aligned in your purpose, it's like you have this operating system. I tell people you become this like self-propelled motivation machine. So organizations who are like, we can't get our people to get motivated, we can't get them to come in on time, stay late, do the work. Motivation isn't a question of discipline. So discipline, really, the definition of discipline is doing something under threat of punishment. I think a lot of times we think, I need to get up at 6 a.m. I got to go to the gym. I need to stop eating carbs. I need to stop doing these things. And we're creating a punishment mechanism for us to change, which simply doesn't work. It works for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, but then you fall off the bandwagon and start all over again, more discouraged and probably more overweight than you were before, versus recognizing that discipline, that motivation isn't about discipline. Motivation is about clarity. So you have motivation when you're clear about who you are and what you're doing and why what you're doing is important. So why matters is because why helps give clarity about why something's important. So recognizing who it is that you're going to be helping. What happens if we don't get it in on time? Why am I doing it and not the person, sitting two seats down from me? Helping clarify the context of the individual employee and why they're doing what they're doing, I think is incredibly important on a project basis. But again, everything really does come down to the who. I had the opportunity to spend about 3 days with Naval Sea Command, helping them on how to help their enlisteds discover and apply their purpose. And through this conversation, it was powerful. We're talking about how do you take someone, whether they're enlisted, whether they're a shipmaker, whether they're an HR, whether they're a janitor, and get beyond just saying I'm attached to the mission, right? Which most organizations that we work with have a mission statement, as you just mentioned. Everyone, wants to know that they're doing something that matters, and they pay high-powered consultants to spend all this time developing this programmatic statement that goes on your website that no one ever reads, because most mission statements people read, they don't live. And the challenge that the Naval Sea Command leadership was having was they're like, yeah, they have a mission, right? They know that they're, so supporting the safety and security of the United States, but they didn't have a face to that mission. And so one of the base commanders was sharing with me how they started to take teams of people over, whether it was HR or catering, and they started taking them to the shipyards. They had them touch and feel and experience the ship that was being made that you're supporting. They had them meet the sailors that they would be supporting and learning from them. Okay, maybe you're an employee working on some, nuanced program, but you meet the sailor who's saying, hey, thank you so much for creating this latch, because now I'm spending 6 months on the ship and that latch helped me live my life better, whatever it is. There's nothing really too small that when you're people oriented and you're using purpose to fuel that you can't find that connection point. Because really at the end of the day, it's what I chatted about at the beginning. Everyone wants to know, number one, that they matter, and number two, that the work that they do matters. And I think if nothing else, that this pandemic has taught companies that the role of us as employers has changed. Whereas before it was very transactional. Hey, come in, you work for me, I pay you, I give you a couple weeks off a year and, maybe some retirement. Then we started to transition, maybe around right after the recession, we started to transition from that transactional to something more transformational. And a big part of that was millennials coming into the workforce, expecting to have more of a relationship with you as an organization, saying, yeah, I want to get paid, but I also too want to become a better person. And I want to make this place a better place as well. So things started to kind of change from something that was merely transactional to something transformational, where the two are helping one another. But now we've really entered what I call the purpose economy, where brands, universities, companies are all recruiting on this idea of purpose, where people are now saying, I want to be able to use my purpose to help other people, or, come and join this university, take classes here because we'll help you find your purpose. And I think that during a season where people are asking, again, some of these biggest life questions, people are now wondering, okay, well, what does purpose actually mean? and creating a system and a sequence that people can simply follow. So that way purpose isn't just a platitude, but purpose is a process for you to learn more about yourself and discover why what you do matters.
That is so, so powerful. And what you just highlighted and articulated is probably the biggest shift that we have actually ever seen in our lifetime, that many people have seen in our lifetime. I've sometimes called it the talent currency shift, and I know that obviously you know the generational space very, very well as being tagged as millennials, America's millennial expert. But there's really, 4 generations right now in the workspace, right? You have baby boomers, which are on the tail end and starting to exit out. You have Generation X, you have millennials, and you have Generation Z. And baby boomers and Generation X, for the longest time, we were told, go to school, get the education, find a company that will hire you. It was very transactional, as you said, and we traded time for money. And it was about the paycheck and it was about the perks. And then, as you so accurately identified, right after the recession in 2008, it started to change. And a big reason for that is because the millennials and Generation Z, Generation Z really wasn't on board at that time, but the millennials at that time were so aware of what was going on. They had watched their parents not come home for dinner, miss the soccer games, miss the dance recitals. They'd watched the divorce rate go up like crazy. They'd watched all of this sacrifice that the older generations had made to amass wealth and climb the corporate ladder and build the retirements and all of that, trading this time for money, to watch half of it fall apart in 1 year. And they were wise and old enough at that point in time to say, not me. That's not what I'm going to spend my life doing. And they wanted their life to matter for something more than something that would evaporate because the economy fell apart. And so that's when, instead of a paycheck and perk, they wanted more of a purpose and a partnership. And the conversation really became about, if I'm going to come work for your company, who are you going to help me become? And then that gave birth to what you just accurately described as the purpose economy, which I know that Aaron Hurst, wrote a book called The Purpose Economy in 2013, and it was kind of ahead of its time. But it really is this concept of, who is it that I'm identifying that I want to become? Who is it that I want to help? That who and who that you talked about. But on the organizational side, who is it that we're helping our people become? That's the greatest question we need to be asking as leaders right now, is who are we helping our people become? And to your point of, this isn't just about, hey, let's go find some great corporate social responsibility cause out there and rally people around that. Different people have different things that are important to them. They have different who's that are a part of their purpose, and they have different whys that motivate them. And so when we talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity, and we can start talking about those topics, that applies there. How are we taking a more open mindset and really finding out what is truly important to each and every single individual that we are employing or leading? And then how are we equipping them to fulfill that in whatever role it is they have as a part of our larger organization?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a really powerful question to get to that, who is your who at work, is to ask people, if you could only help one group of people, who would that be? And so sometimes folks in HR don't want to ask that question. They're like, well, what if they say not us? And I hear this all the time. You probably do too, is corporations will say, well, yeah, we'd love to bring you in, but like, what if you help our employees find their purpose and they all leave? And I usually tell them, well, they were going to leave anyway. Here's the truth. However, that's point number one. But point number two is, and this is so important, purpose is vocation agnostic. Purpose is vocation agnostic. And so that doesn't mean that you're stuffing your purpose in a corner if you're, teaching kindergarten, but you really want to be, the next Sarah Blakely with Spanx or something. You're still able to use your purpose. You're still able to use your purpose if you're at home with your kids. You're still able to use your purpose if you're retired, or if you're in between jobs, or if you're homeless. The job title you have does not give you permission to use your purpose. You do.
That's
a
right.
Purpose inside of you does. And so recognizing as organizations that if you open up this opportunity to be able to help your people find their purpose, they're not going to leave. You're going to have a hard time keeping them because they're going to have a hard time because they're staying so long, because you now have a Rolodex of employees who are not only fired up about knowing that what they do matters, they're then recruiting their friends and their family. I mean, still the number one way to recruit great people is to hire great people, because great people know great people. It's really quite simple. And so, and I've had the opportunity to work with a number of amazing organizations. I often tell the story of this one young man. I've written, as you mentioned before, 5 books. One of my books I wrote is called The Millennial Entrepreneur. And this was during kind of this rise of entrepreneurship amongst my generation. 65% of millennials still to this day want to start their own company. And so I was curious about what that looked like. I had started my own company. I was looking at my own generation. And a big part of it was this kind of mission that this generation wanted to know that their life mattered. And I interviewed this young man. I tell the story when I do keynotes all the time, where he taught me so much. At the time, he was barely 30 years old. He said he was in a fast casual company. It was kind of like a Chipotle for pizza. And he said, I recognize that, people may work for me for 6 weeks, for 6 months, for 6 years, for 16 years. I don't know. But he said, I know this. I know that after they leave, I want them to be better people than when they came. And he said, I want to do that because I recognize that they're going to be the best recruiters. They're going to be the best customers. They're going to be the best brand ambassadors and representatives of the kind of culture that we have. And so he said, this is an investment in the people that I have here on my team, and I'm willing to do things differently, even if they move on. I've heard other executives say it even more eloquently, to say, I'm always training my people for their next job. I'd like their next job to be with us, but even if not, I'm still preparing them. And I think that's the kind of abundant mentality that becoming a purpose-oriented organization thrusts you into, because you recognize that there's always more where it comes from. You're not worried about, do you have more of a piece of the pie than I do? You're like, we got a kitchen, let's just make more pies. Like, changing the mindset about talent, qualified people, helping, making sure that you get the right people on the bus and all of that, all incredibly important conversations. But the way that you just shift your mindset around talent, I think, in the purpose economy is really what is going to separate the winners from the losers emerging from this time, where you'll see some companies emerging saying, like, we're just trying to, stay afloat, keep everybody where we're at, and they're in that crisis reaction mode. Well, it's been 7 months. Here's what's something really interesting we talk about in our book. We call it the 7 to 1 principle. So my husband had come home. This is maybe a couple years ago. He'd come home. His grandmother had passed away, and he had come home from doing the eulogy, and we were kind of reflecting as one does when someone passed. And he said, "It's amazing how quickly your life goes." And he's not exactly morbid, he's very calculating. So being the kind of Excel spreadsheet wizard that he is, he went into the other room and he created this Excel spreadsheet that he's like, this is my life clock. I kid you not, he still has it, where he said the average person lives to 78. He's like, we eat really well, we're obsessed with longevity. My plan is to be 120, as is his. So he said, okay, maybe like 84, right? And so he added a couple more years in there, and he said, okay, well, how much of my time on this earth have I used? And he blocked off that time in the Excel spreadsheet. Then he said, okay, I wonder how long it takes to live just 1% of your life. I said, I don't know. He said, do you think it's like a couple months or a couple years? I said, I have no idea. So we did the math, and here's what we found. To live 1% of your life is just 7 months. If you live to the average of 78, which is the average time someone in the United States will pass away, 7 months is 1%. Well, we've been in COVID, we've been in quarantine for 7 months. And so that 1% of your life has passed. And so you have the choice to either redeem those 7 months, to say, I'm not going to let that be an ink blot on my timeline of my life, where I was just playing video games, watching television, reacting, just trying to get things to return back to normal, which, by the way, it's usually a normal that you didn't like to begin with. Isn't that the irony, that everyone's like, I want things to return to normal, but I hated normal, but at least I knew normal, right? It was a normal that you knew. There's a difference. So rather than saying, hey, this is 1% that was wasted, recognize that this could be the 1% that changed the rest of your life, and recognizing that 1% could change the 99%, all because of purpose.
That was so good. And I know there are people right now that are processing that and saying, first of all, thank you for sharing what you just said, because I want to redeem the last 7 months. I want that 1% back. And I don't know what the next couple months is going to look like. There's still so much division and so much anxiety and so much uncertainty. And we can get into a whole host of issues that we won't get into. And I don't even know what 2021 is going to look like. And there's this paralytic fear that is preventing people from moving on or from truly fulfilling the purpose that they were created for. And if they're not careful, they're going to walk away from this live cast, and another 7 months is going to pass. And then that's 2% they have to redeem. So what would you share from an encouragement standpoint for someone who's listening to this right now? Because there's a lot of people that are listening to this going, yes, you're so spot on. They're right. And they're experiencing purpose. They're fulfilling this. But there's another audience that's listening to this right now that's saying, you know what? That's not me. I'm struggling. I've lost the last 7 months. I've lost that 1%. I don't want to lose another 7 months. I don't want to lose another percent of my life. And I want to find that fulfillment and start living out my purpose now. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful perspective to recognize that there's nothing lost in the purpose economy. Absolutely everything that you've experienced and that you've overcome is to be used and can be redeemed to be able to help other people. What is a true tragedy of a failure isn't the failure itself. It's when you don't use the lessons that you learned from that failure to help other people.
Yes.
So we're constantly paying things forward, being able to help other people make better decisions, get into better relationships, save their marriage, whatever big failure you've experienced, you've now overcome it. And now that gives you authority to be able to help others overcome their own failures, setbacks, and challenges. And so even looking back and saying, hey, I did consume more than I create, and I was more bitter than better, and I wasn't able to really utilize this time, and I'm ashamed of it. Recognizing that there's purpose in that pain. So rather than glossing over it and saying, well, the next 7 months will be better, take the moment and reflect on, what am I feeling in this moment? I think especially as Americans, we kind of move on to the next thing, and we're so poly positive all the time that we're like, we're going to be great. And we, read a motivational book, and we, watch a TED Talk, and we get pumped on to the next day without recognizing that there's importance of reflection. And I think that that's so incredibly important. I know we're both Christians. One of the things that I really love about the Old Testament is how God would actually tell the Israelites whenever he did something great to build this monument, put some rocks up, remember this moment. And that's kind of a mantra we have in our business is, my husband and I and our team, we love celebrating wins, but we also to reflect on the losses. And so we have this kind of mantra of like, put rocks in a pile and let's move on. And that's kind of our way of saying, let's remember this moment, let's memorialize it, so that way we've learned from it. So the biggest tragedy would not to be necessarily just say, okay, the next 7 months will be better. The tragedy would be to say, I didn't learn anything from even wasting the last 7 months. So taking that moment to reflect and say, I recognize I didn't use it as well as I could have. I recognize that I didn't push myself. I didn't necessarily see it as a gift, but I saw it as a crisis. Now's the moment to process that pain and recognize I have regrets, and that's an important feeling to give life to and give breath to, and recognize that you now have the authority and the ability to make today the day that you pivot your mind and your future by recognizing that your purpose is something not only worth pursuing, but it's worth pursuing now. So that next 7 months, that next 1% of your life, hey, in 7 months, you could be happily married. You could be in your dream job. You could be a millionaire. Amazing things happen in 7 months. But for most people, the next 7 months, it's going to be more of the same, more, reacting to other people's voicemails and kind of doing everyone else's agenda, or, doing kind of the same old. And so you have the ability to determine what those next 7 months look like. Your spouse doesn't, your boss doesn't, your kids don't. They are all responsible for themselves, but you're responsible for yourself and determining how you're going to use your purpose to help other people.
So good. I love the analogy of putting rocks up and let's move on. That is such a great visual. What are the areas in your life that you need to go back? And I think that's the one thing that coming off of this live cast as we wrap up here, that regardless of where you fall on the spectrum of, yeah, we're doing most of this, or I'm doing most of this, or oh my gosh, I don't know where to start, is that no matter where you're at on the spectrum, you got to stop and you got to reevaluate the season of time that we have been in. And where do you put up the rocks to honor what has been? And where do you put up the rocks to memorialize some of that pain and recognize that there is purpose in the pain? And there's been a lot of pain in this season for a lot of people. I know that we've all lost people to COVID. There's a lot of loss in this time, both mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially. There's a lot of loss. But there's also purpose in that pain, as we talked about coming in the beginning of this, is what is it that you have been through, and what is it that God shaped in you? What did you learn from that through that season? What red seas have you been through that you made it to the other side that you could talk about, that you could share that journey to engage, inspire others to fulfill the purpose that they have in their lives, and theirs is going to be different. And so I think that there's every single person, if they're hearing this today, if they're alive and breathing today, they've been through the last 7 months, there was a purpose in that we're each meant to use individually, in our relationships, at work, somehow. But I think that is such great advice. What we all need to do is pause, reflect, figure out what just transpired, put up those rocks, and then move on. And like you said, there is so much that can change in the next 7 months. And if this is a season that you have been consuming, you can use it to create, as you said. If this is a season that you've been bitter, you could use it to be better, as you said. If this is a season that you have been panicking or pandering, this is a season that you could be positioning yourself to fulfill the purpose that you were created for. Gabrielle, I can't thank you enough for sharing so much of your heart and mind to so many people that need to hear it. I'm really, really, really excited to get that book that's on the other side of that screen, not just on the shelf, but in my hand. So I can
It'll be,
digest it.
it's soon. Woohoo!
The purpose factor. And I highly, highly recommend that you follow Gabrielle on LinkedIn, that you get her book, digest it, but that you take this. Don't walk away from this live cast as just one of many podcasts that you've listened to and just moved on with, like a TED Talk or anything else. There was so much wisdom and knowledge and nuggets that Gabrielle shared here that I implore you, I intrigue you to apply it to your lives, to apply it to your organization, and not let another 7 months pass that were meant to be used to be something absolutely transformational in your life and in your organization. As we close here, Gabrielle, one last word. What is it that you want to say to those that are listening right now?
Yeah, I think that the big message that we share in the purpose factor, and something that's always on my heart, is that your purpose is your permission. And I think recognizing that the season is giving you ample opportunity, ample time, ample space to be able to really pursue that purpose in this season. And so take the time, recognize that you only have one life, that you have an opportunity to be able to use that life no matter where you're at. If you're 22 or 102, if you have breath in your lungs, we say breath equals purpose. And so that means that you have every opportunity to help someone. So even just today, practice it out. If you don't feel fulfilled, just go help one person. I've never had anyone help someone else and say, I really regretted that. There's something inside of us that we're created to help our who. And so focusing on who it is that you need to help. Number one, who are you? And then again, who are you supposed to help, is going to help bring so much clarity and so much meaning to the work that you're currently doing.
So good. So good. Thank you so much for taking time to be here today. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the purpose space. Thank you so much for being a voice and giving a voice to so many who need to hear everything that you just said, and for imploring us to live out and to truly fulfill what we're all here for. I'm so grateful for you, my friend. I'm so grateful for all that you're doing, and that your husband, Brian, is doing. I know he wasn't on here today, but please give my best to him as well. And I can't wait to read your book and to continue to impact lives the way that you are just across, not just this country, but across the world, across humanity. Such a great message. Thank you so very much.
Well, thanks for having me on. And I just want to thank you and honor for you for the space that you're in, for elevating the conversation around purpose, creating some really important programs and systems for companies, and helping people recognize that people and leaders of all ages recognize that this is a season where purpose matters, and giving folks the tools to process through it. So I'm very thankful. I'm honored that you had me on to have this conversation. And I really hope that it was encouraging, enlightening, and hopefully just a little entertaining for those of the folks who are still listening.
It was absolutely encouraging, absolutely enlightening. The honor truly has been all mine. It is a privilege to be on this journey together. And again, I'm just so grateful. So for those of you who listened today, I encourage you to go follow Gabrielle, get her new book with Brian, The Purpose Factor, and read her other books and follow her on all social media. There's a lot she has to share. So until next time, we hope that you will utilize this, apply it to your lives. Don't just listen to it, apply it, do something with it. And we'll see you next time on the Finding Purpose LiveCast.